Hey everybody, Mo here, and today I'm bringing you guys a deck tech on Sett Riftbound champion, or I guess legend, in Riftbound, the League of Legends trading card game, TCG. Yeah, so it's going to be a deck tech on Sett. This is my current take on Sett. This is what I think is probably the best way to play Sett in the meta right now. Which the meta right now, if you're watching this in the future, is effectively ran over by Kai'Sa and Yi. There is some other decks in there like Misfortune Aurora. Those are really the big three right now, especially if you're looking at China meta, the big three. There is some Victor, but for the most part, it is Kai'Sa, Yi, and MF Aurora. In the West, there's there's quite a few other decks that are popular, like Hook Darius is fairly popular. Sett himself is like, all right, he's lost a lot of popularity since he is so bad into Kai'Sa right now, especially the traditional Kai'Sa list. And they're just, in general, a little bit more representation of other decks. But for the most part, even in the West, it is still dominated and doing well by Kai'Sa. I say dominated by Kai'Sa. That's not really true. But Kai'Sa, I think, has only ever won one tournament here. I think 2 total ever out of all the turns we've had. But yeah, point being, Kai'Sa is still the best deck at the game right now. The whole purpose of building any deck is has to be able to either just say you're going to ignore Kai'Sa but beat literally everything else, or you have to be able to beat Kai'Sa and Yi. And the first one is like a fine option if you're okay with just inting away the Kai'Sa matching and beating literally everything else, except for the fact that Kai'Sa is just very popular. So the odds of you dodging Kai'Sa is going to be not very easy. So I have a couple of ways that I like to attack Kai'Sa through her game plans. It just mostly depends on what type of Kai'Sa they are, but especially if they're the greedy Kai'Sa that's been really popular, especially in China, then this deck is going to be really good into that, as well as just in general this deck's going to be good in that. If you have never joined or watched one of my deck techs before, 1, hi, welcome in. 2, this is going to be fairly long. I'm going to go in depth into the purpose of every single card. Most of the time my deck techs are around an hour or slightly over an hour long, simply because I literally sit here and go over every single card, the purpose of the card, why I play the card over something else. I do a little bit of I'll go over the general game plan of the deck and how to do that as well. I don't go over mulligan strategies because there is a mulligan and sideboard guide coming out on my Metafy always for free, which you guys should go check out. And yeah, and then I'll have a VOD review usually of me playing the deck or someone else playing the deck, and I VOD review Sett. I already have a Sett VOD review of Sett into Kai'Sa and explaining how you can beat Kai'Sa as Sett. But that's a different deck than we have here. This deck, again, is aggro Sett, so I built it in aggro. We'll get into the deck in just one moment. I just wanted to quickly, I know I keep my intros, I've gotten really long. I'm trying to keep them under 2 minutes. Technically, we're already at 3 minutes right now, but I haven't done an intro. I was just explaining the deck. Quick things, go join my Metafy. It is sick. I post free content over there, so you can just follow over that for the free content. Paid content, if you're a subscriber on Metafy, they're getting so much content. I think they got 3 exclusive videos by the time this one came out, and then they're getting even more exclusive VOD reviews by the end of this week. So they're already getting, I think it's close to $60 worth of content just in this last week alone with the 2 free VOD reviews. Plus somebody got a VOD review, so for that person, they kind of got $90 of value. But anytime I post a VOD review for exclusively from a coaching or a VOD review that I do on Metafy, I post it for the members and then for the subscribers, and then so you can look at it as every time I post a VOD video. That's a free YouTube video, a complete YouTube video, but they're usually really long. They're an hour long each, always go really in depth. You learn a lot, and then you can look at it as $30 in value for every VOD, because if you were to get a VOD review from me, I think it's closer to I think it's $20 maybe, or $25. So you can look at it as $20 per video that they're getting in content, plus they'll get a free ticket to my tournament prep stream that I'll be doing exclusively on Metafy when it comes closer to the big tournament and the skirmishes and all that fun stuff happening in December and after the game launches. But that's gonna be it. Look at that. Keep that intro an hour. Oh my god, basically I kept that intro a minute and a half long. So let's get in here with the actual explaining of the deck. So as the title says, aggro Sett. The deck list to this will be in the description below as well. I'm starting to put all of my decks as public on my Piltover archive. I have my super secret, top secret, world's winning deck list still privated, but any deck that you see on here will be public, as well as other decks that I either haven't covered yet or will be covering in the future, so you can even get a little sneak peek and know what decks are coming. over on my Piltover archive. I would probably just have a link in the description to my Piltover archive, and then you can click on the deck there. So like for the set deck, you click on that, it'll be updated. And then, yeah, so let's get into it. Let's start. So we'll start at the top. Sett. Why Sett? What Sett do? So Sett is an orange-yellow legend. He is one of two. Really, he's one of one. He's the only orange-yellow legend, now that I think about it. I don't know why I said two. That was just a clear mistake by Riot. So, Sett says, when a buffed unit you control would die, you may pay a power, exhaust the legend, and then spend its buff, recall it exhausted instead. When you conquer, ready me. Basically what that means, if you've never played against Sett or you're still learning, if your unit has a buff token on it and that unit were to die somehow or about to die, instead what you would do is you just remove the buff from it, you tap your legend, and then instead of dying, that unit will move to your base. If it's already in your base, it stays in the base. You can use this while your unit is in base. It effectively just stops any buffed unit from dying. It's that simple. You remove the buff from it to keep it from dying. You can do it once per turn on defense, unless you somehow conquer on your opponent's turn, which I don't even think you can do in orange-yellow, if I'm not mistaken. So effectively, one time on defense, you can use it one time on offense and defense, because he says when you conquer, ready me. So you can send a unit in with a buff, trade a little bit, save it with your Sett, conquer a battlefield, untap your Sett, and then now you have him to defend again or make another unit live. Very strong ability. Very strong ability. Letting your unit not die is kind of crazy. That is kind of a crazy effect. I'm not going to lie to you. It only costs a power, it doesn't even cost an energy, so you could be completely tapped out. Cost energy. Because of this, he is a fairly power-hungry deck if you aren't paying attention and you build him too power-hungry, which is a big mistake I see a lot of the time in Sett decks, where they'll say like, oh, I want to play, 3 Sett spell, I want to play 3 sabotage, I want to play like 3 Kiana, I want to play this, I want to play that. All these cards that take a lot of power, but if you're not running seals or have a seal, if you even are running the seals, that is a lot of power every turn to be like playing these power costed cards, running them in and then saving them with another power. It can add up really quickly, and you very oftentimes don't get past the like 5 energy limit when you do stuff like that, which I have a couple of ways that I solve in this deck. Also, in most decks, you don't really need to get past 5 energy. Once you get to the 5 energy mark, you can play any unit in your deck, because the most expensive unit in your deck, even in standard like mid-range Sett decks, is going to be 5 energy most of the time. It's just your Sett chosen champion, maybe like a Snapvine. Maybe you get crazy and play like a Lee Sin that like buffs your buffs legends, or buff your buff units or something. Like, but for the most part, 5 energy is where you're capped at for legends anyways, or for units anyways. So having these expensive cards and these expensive power costs doesn't actually hurt you too much. When you get 2 runes back, if you only need to be at 5, you're getting almost half of the runes total that you need to cap out of your abilities. Obviously, the more runes, the better, because you can start doing things like double combat trick, or you can play a unit and have a combat trick open. But for the most part, you are a low energy deck. You're not oftentimes getting above 5 to 6, like I said, especially if you're playing a power hungry type of deck. We are not doing that. I will go over our deck in a moment, but we actually do a really good job with power. We play a lot of cards that just don't have power. We play 1 yellow card that costs power, basically, and then we have some like 9 body cards that cost 1 power. So all in all, in our 40 card deck, we only have, it says 13, we really only have 12, because one of them is a hidden blade. So I guess, yes, 13, but it doesn't even have to be a yellow rune, it could be any rune. But we play 13 runes, or 13 cards total, and this is including sideboard, I'm fairly certain. 13 cards sideboard, 13 cards total, including your sideboard of cards that cost power. In the main deck, we're playing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, so we're playing 12 cards in the main board. I guess I could have just counted that way. I don't know why I did that. Yeah, we don't have a lot of cards that cost power, is the whole point of that conversation. Which is really good. That lets us get to our higher end, where we can play things like our big end in this deck, which is a stratagem, so 6 energy. It also, again, lets us start doing things like play a 4 energy unit, and then potentially have some sort of combat trick up, as well as we play a confront, so we can start comboing things like once we're on the 5 or 6 mana, we can play confront and then play 2 units, and that's very big. If you play confront, a 2-drop and a 4-drop, that's a lot of value that you can be getting. As top of that, we have some battlefields that will help us in this scenario also. Let's go to our rune count. Our rune count is 4 order runes and 8 body runes. So that is 4 yellow, 4 bananas, and 8 oranges. We are a banana and orange deck. The reason for this is we only have like 2 cards in our entire deck that cost yellow runes. I think most set lists are actually only on like a 9-3 split. They're only on 3 yellow runes because typically the only cards they have that cost yellow power are in the sideboard. It'll be like Leonas and Salvages in the sideboard, or maybe like Coals or something, but even then not super often for that one. But we don't have that issue because we are playing, or sorry, not issue, but we play one more because we are on Grand Stratagem, which costs 3 yellow by itself. So playing 4 yellow lets you recycle 1 yellow for one of your cards that cost a yellow power. Again, in our main deck, it is literally 2 total cards, not like 2 cards that we're playing 3 of each. It is 2 total cards we're playing 2 Vanguard Captains in the main deck. That is the only thing that costs yellow yellow power. Yes, we have Hidden Blades, but Hidden Blades most of the time are going to be hidden. Otherwise, it is just a blade. So we are going to hide them for an orange rune most of the time because we have a lot of orange runes and don't have to use our yellow runes. So we will be at this 3 yellow power for our Grand Stratagem by the time we need it, almost always. It's just you don't want to be in a spot where you only have 3 yellow runes. You have to play a Vanguard Captain to make your stratagem big and good, and then now you have to wait like 3 turns before you actually see that yellow rune again, right? You don't want to be in that spot. So this lets you play a Vanguard Captain during your game and still be able to play the stratagem on curve or whenever you need to. So we are a 4-8 split. Next, we will go over battlefields. Before we do that, let's go over the general game plan of the deck, actually, because that will help explain the battlefields a little bit more instead of being like, this battlefield is for this gameplay pattern, this battlefield is for this, blah, blah, blah. So this deck specifically, and why I chose to build Sett this way and have been playing Sett this way, is it's a very aggressive deck. It's a very aggressive aggro Sett is the name of it. It's a very aggressive low to the ground deck. If you look at our energy curve here, we play 1 0 cost card, we play 1 seal, yes. We play, a couple of spells that cost 1 energy. But as far as units go, 16 of our 40 card deck, really 39, 16 of our 39 card deck cost 2 energy. Or, so once you take into account the 1 energy and 0 energy, that's 3, that's 16. That's 19 of our 39 card deck. That is literally over half of our deck, or right at half of our deck for 2 cost or less energy. So we are a very low to the ground aggressive deck. Then we have about 8 cards that cost 3 energy. We have 10 cards that cost 4 energy. And then we have 1 5-drop, which is our chosen champion. And then we have 2 6-drops, which are the Grand Stratagems. And that's where our deck caps out. Our deck caps out at 6 energy. We do not need a lot of energy. And you only need 6 energy on the what is presumably going to be the final turn of the game. So you will play most of your game on probably 4 to 5 energy, just like other Sett decks, except when you're on 4 energy, you're still playing 2 cards a turn. You're playing a lot of cards a turn, thanks to, even if you are just playing a 4-drop, you play a 4-drop, go to 5 energy, cool, you play a 3 and a 2, or you can play 2 2s and then an Unyielding Spirit open. You can play a Confront and a 3 and then have everything come in ready, which is kind of sick. So that's why we're a really low to the ground aggro deck. Why are we a low to the ground aggro deck instead of a mid-rangey, beefy type Sett deck that you see that plays 3 of the chosen champion, tries to come in with big orange sets? We're on 0 challenges, 0 snap vines, stuff like that. It's because I think in the meta right now, 1 big unit is actually not that good. Because if you look at how the best deck in the game right now, which is Kai'Sa, plays, they play some removal spells, so they'll play like, 3 mana deal 4, 1 mana deal 3. But their best cards are actually going to be things like Darius Cleave is a good combo to come over the top. It's going to be things like Smokescreen, which is effectively a 2 energy, deal 4, 2 energy -4. It's ways that can deal with big units very effectively. They play things like Singularity sometimes, which deals 6 to 2 units. Of course, it costs 6 itself, so it's very expensive. But it deals 6 to 2 units, which most of the time, if it is a 5 or 6 might unit, or cost 5 or 6 might unit, it's going to cost a decent amount of energy. So by the time you calculate in how much energy of units you removed for your 6 energy singularity, you come out ahead, or oftentimes at least even, or the amount of tempo you bought is really good. On top of that, the meta right now in general is just favoring one big unit, or is favoring punishing the big unit idea. You know, you have Master Yi, which their plan is typically just to hold with one unit, and then a lot of decks are trying to find ways and are finding ways to counter that by just having cards that have pretty efficient removal once your unit becomes expensive or big. That's why we saw Lux top 64, the most recent China Open. So a Lux actually made day 2, which people thought Lux is like this unplayable deck. I think in my most recent tier list video, I also didn't rate Lux very high. I think she said, I might have just straight up put her in like the lunch tier, saying, you know, bring this champion if you're here to have fun and not expect to duel. Like, I don't think I gave it a chance to day 2 even, whereas obviously it can day 2. You know, it destroys Master Yi because it plays cards and removals like the, let me open up the cards here, the card pool. So, let me do this. You know, yellow, blue, mostly it's the blue removal, so it plays Falling Comet, which is a 5 energy, deal 6 to a unit. 5 energy, deal 6 is fairly efficient, no power cost, has to be on the battlefield, but 6 damage is a lot of damage to something. Lux gets to play things like the yellow removal spells, the 6 energy, just kill a unit. You know what? Fox is really good. Fox is 7 energy, most of the time 8 energy because it'll come in accelerated. It's an 8 energy 10 might unit most of the time with accelerate, because it's 8 energy 7 and then gives your unit -3. Well, you know what beats 8 energy 10 might unit is a 6 energy kill your guy, 4 energy kill your guy. Even 5 energy deals 6, so that way we can almost kill it, and then if you do have a Stupefy, boom, there you go, we've killed your guy. A lot of these removal spells in the game are fairly expensive. The best ones are the ones that are cheap, which is why Falling Star is so good, because Falling Star is such a cheap card, and it gets rid of 2 units or 1 big unit. The fact that it can do either or and hit base is why it's such a good card, but most of the meta right now is focused around beating big units, whether that big unit is a Master Yi unit that is trying to hold, or a dragon coming off of Master Yi, whether that big unit is a Darius, is a Watcher, whether that big unit is an Aurora unit, because Aurora is very popular. Most of it is geared around beating these big units, getting greedy, going taller, and decks trying to out-greed each other in a way. So we can punish that by playing smaller units, efficient, cheap units that are efficient in the fact that we get a lot of value. They're either going to be on rate or even above rate cards. So typically in Runeterra, or not Runeterra, oh my gosh, in Riftbound, a 2 energy 2 vanilla is going to be fairly on rate, because 2 energy 2 with, not 2 energy 2 vanilla, a 2 energy 2 with an ability is going to be on rate. And anything that is a 2 mana 2 that has an ability is going to be looked at. Anything that is a 2 mana 3 or better is going to be looked at. I think if you look at the entire pool of 2 energy units, let me pull it up here and I'll tell you guys what I find. For those of you wondering why I'm explaining cards the way I do, it's because I like my videos to be podcast style, to where you can just throw it on and listen to the side while you do some sort of work, whether it's like housework, homework, like actual work, or if you're driving somewhere. You know, it's easy to be able to follow along. So in the entire pool here, if you look at the units, they are effectively all either 2 energy 2s with an ability, or they are smaller than a 2 energy 2, but they have an ability that kind of makes up for it. There's actually not a unit that is just bigger than a 2 energy 2, just like baseline. Like, there is no vanilla 2 energy 2 unit. I think a 2 energy 3 vanilla would be, you know, quite strong, but a very solid baseline to say. I'd say 3 might. If your 2 energy unit is not giving you at least 3 might, then it is not going to be really worth playing unless the ability is very good. So you have cards like Legion Rearguard, which is a 2 energy 2, but has the potential to accelerate, so it can come in quickly. You have Chemtech Enforcer, which is a 2 mana 2, but when it's attacking, it's actually 2 mana 4, of course, you know, it has to have a air quotes downside, which is discard a card. When you're playing Jinx, though, a lot of times you want to discard your cards, or you have cards that have discard synergy, so you're not actually upset by that, right? All the other cards, I'm not going to go through every single 2-cost card here, but basically any card that costs 2 energy, any unit that costs 2 energy, has at least 2 might and still an ability. Or if it is less than 1 might, it is because the ability is really good and would be broken if it was also at 2 might, right? So with that being said, we play a bunch of 2-mana 2s that are really efficient. Effectively, we pay 3 2-mana 3s, and we have Cithria, which is a 2-mana 2, but it's important that her 2 is a buff token, which our deck loves to interact with between things like Call to Glory. We can remove that buff and buff something. We play Wildclaw Shaman, which will remove that buff and just transfer it to the Shaman and give him Accelerate. You can just keep your Cithria alive forever with the Sett ability, so it makes her not die. Then you play a unit, buffs her again, so she's like a 2-mana 2 that just doesn't die, which is pretty sick, right? So that's what our deck does, is a bunch of efficient things that way. And then once you spend more energy, we get even more efficient. We have our Vanguard Captain, which is a 3 energy 5. We have Fiora, Kiana, and Wildclaw Shaman, which are all 4 energy 4s, like at their baseline. Yes, Wildclaw Shaman is a 4 energy 3 baseline. You will never play Wildclaw Shaman as a 4 energy 3, like ever. So all of our 4 drops here, even our Kinku Monk, all of our 4 drops are 4 energy 4s at a baseline, but they all have really strong abilities that either make them bigger than 4, or they have an ability that makes up for it. So Kinku Monk is like a 4 energy 6 because it's a 4 energy 4, and then it buffs 2 other units, so that's another 2 might. You have Kiana, which is a 4 energy 4 but has deflect, so she's taxing your opponent. She also draws a card or channels a rune when she conquers, so you know, that ability is obviously very good. You have Fiora, which is a 4 energy 4, but as soon as you do buff her in any way, she becomes a 4 energy 6 when defending, or probably closer to like a 5 energy 6 while defending. And then she also gains, you know, deflect, ganking, like all these keywords, which makes it hard to interact with her. So all of our units are very efficient, and then we're on this kind of swarmy aggro game plan that's going to eventually end the game with a grand stratagem. That is the whole purpose here. Now, these strategies are oftentimes kind of scary because when you play cheap units, the biggest boogeyman and best card in the game right now, and you know, I've said this before, predicted if a card gets banned ever, the first card to ever eat a ban will be Falling Star. Falling Star is 2 energy, 2 power, most of the time 1 power because it's being played by Kai'Sa. So it's 2 energy, 1 power, deal 3 damage twice, you know, to units. So you effectively wipe out 2 early game units, which is why Falling Star is kind of gatekeeping a lot of aggro decks right now. Because if you spend 4 energy to put 2 units into play, if I put down, you know, a Poro into a Glory Seeker, boom, 2 energy. You know, Darius can do that turn 1 when going second. That's not that good when Kai'Sa can just spend 1 card to get rid of your 2 cards. They spent 1 card, half of the energy you spent, and then only 1 power to get rid of 2 of your units, and that's very, you know, hard to come back from. Well, because we're in Sett, the reason we can play a deck like this is because all of our 3 might units already get +1 from getting buffed somehow, either from like Kinku Monk, like Kinku Monk or Pit Rookie, which is nice. So that moves them up to 4, which already dodges the Falling Star. Our 4 drops are all already 4 energy, so they are dodging Falling Star already anyways. But then the biggest key as to why this deck can function without Falling Star, into a Falling Star meta, is because of our Sett Legend. Oops, not that Sett. Our Sett Legend here. So our Sett Legend lets us effectively stop one of the Falling Star killing triggers. So we are trading, you know, 1 power for their 1 power for them to kill 1 unit. So they're spending 2 energy and a power to kill 1 of our 3 drops, and then Sett the Boss will just save the other, one of our 3 might units, and our Sett the Boss Legend will save the other unit. And that's very important, and that's actually such a huge tempo swing and a way to kind of negate the best card in the game, and this is something that really interested me and really made me want to look into this aggro Sett style even more. On top of the fact that we are orange, we get to play Unyielding Spirit. We're playing 2 in the main deck. I think if you're on any orange deck, there's not really a reason to not play Unyielding Spirit in the main deck right now. It's fairly good. It's good into MF Aurora. It's fine into Victor. It's good into Kai'Sa. Basically, the only top decks that it doesn't do anything against at all is going to be Master Yi and then usually Sett. Even Darius Hook is playing like Void Seekers or Falling Stars, sometimes Hex Rays. So having an Unyielding Spirit in the main is like totally fine because they're going to be on some amount of Void Seekers and Falling Stars. So Unyielding Spirit in the main deck is perfectly fine, especially when the most popular deck is Kai'Sa, right? Again, we'll go over all these specific cards in a minute, but again, the game plan is to just be aggressive. We play really low to the ground units. The idea is to just score as many points as you can. Ideally, you can buff your unit that scored. So what happens is you play a unit, you move it up to score, it has a buff on it. So now what happens is when your opponent tries to kill that unit, either by attacking into it or using a spell on it or something, you can save it with Sett, bring it back, and you still just have this wide board, and you continuously have this wide board and make your board wide. So that way, once you get to 6 points, you can just play a grand stratagem and then end the game at that point, right? Which is something that a lot of other decks can't do, and a lot of aggro decks are struggling with, is going, okay, I can get the points quickly. I can get fast points. I have accelerate units. I have units I can play directly on the battlefields, etc., right? But what happens is your mid-range opponent eventually just gets to the spot to where they've, you attack, get a point, they attack, get a point, and kill your unit. You probably deal with their unit, they attack you back and deal with your unit. But their units progressively get bigger as the game goes, whereas your units don't typically hit a threshold that is too big to deal with. And you have a lot of really small bad cards in your deck because you're an aggro deck, and what happens is you eventually top deck like a 2-drop on turn 4 or 5, and you lose the game because your opponent gets all of the tempo back, they have big units in play, and they just run away with the game, right? This deck doesn't worry about that because you don't lose a lot of tempo by having early game units on the battlefield, because if your opponent can deal with it, whether it's a spell or attacking into it, you simply just save it with Sett, the boss. So again, if we played a Daring Poro, attacked with it, buffed the Daring Poro, we're defending for 3 and we attacked for 3. Those are great stat lines. If you were able to buff it before it attacked, it could have even attacked for 4 and then still be defending for 3. And then on top of that, your opponent has to deal with a 3 might 2-drop, which is very efficient. And you just kind of save it with your Sett champion or Sett legend and then just attack in with the Poro again anyways, and you still have it to go wide, right? So that's kind of the whole purpose of this deck and why it's so good, is because you can play these low to the ground units, you buff them, you make them big, so they're efficient even for their size or for their cost, and then eventually you get to the end game where you have units always for your stratagem because you've been saving your units throughout the game with your Sett legend. And yes, even by paying the 1 power per turn for the Sett legend, you will still get to the 6 energy needed for grand stratagem by the time it is time for you to win with your grand stratagem. So that is how the deck wants to play. Low to the ground, swarm aggro, save your units almost as much as possible, like really just never let your units die, and then grand stratagem will always win you the game. Of course, I'm not saying you have to save every single unit. We don't even have the most amount of ways to buff units. If you look at it, we only have 5 cards in our deck that buff other units. Of course, we have 3, 6, 9 cards that buff themselves. So out of all of our units, only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of our units don't buff themselves. That's less than half of them, but they can receive buffs from other cards that are good, right? Maybe at some point I add in another way to give buffs. Like I could very much see one of Bar being fine. The issue is Bar is kind of like a slow tempo card, which isn't great. If there's any other better way to buff to buff a unit, I could see that being super, super helpful. But I could honestly see playing one of Bar in here just because always being able to buff your units and keep them to undying is amazing, right? But yeah, that's how you play the deck. So now that we understand the concept of the deck and we understand what the deck is trying to do, why it's good into Kai'Sa, why I built it this way, or why I built it this way to be better into Kai'Sa than I think the mid-range decks are, and why this isn't a traditional mid-range set, big unit, triple chosen champion deck. We can get into the battlefields and the cards and understanding how they help us with that game plan. All right, so we'll start with battlefields. So the first battlefield we'll go over is a very standard one. It is Monastery of Harana. So this says, when you conquer here, you may spend a buff to draw one. Obviously, drawing one in an aggro deck, anytime you can draw cards in an aggro deck, that's very good for you. I'm fairly tempted. This used to be for the longest time in this deck when I was building it. I kept going back and forth between this and Zon Warrens, I think is the name of it, the battlefield where when you conquer, you discard a card, draw a card. One, because we're an aggro deck, so the odds of us emptying out our hand sometimes is pretty good. And two, because a lot of times you kind of want to just churn and draw cards and try and get into your stratagem in the late game. That's how aggro decks do well. Aggro decks that have a lot of card draw or card advantage that can dig into their late game and guarantee they have their late game stuff are typically ones that do very, very well, right? So that is something that, you know, I've considered. I might even go back into this. If you watch this video in the future, I can see myself taking, you know, Monastery of Harana out just to put in the other battlefield, or maybe even Star-Tipped Peak out to put in that one to draw some cards. Also, the Candlelit is very fine. It doesn't draw you cards, but it does let you dig deep to find your stratagems or to find your cards that buff, like the Kinku Monks and your Pit Rookies, right? So those are both very fair options to play, and there's a good chance that one of these battlefields gets taken out for something like a Candlelit. And that lets you look at the top two cards and bottom them or put them back in any order, right? That is something that's very fair. The next battlefield we'll go over is going to be Windswept Hillock, or Hillock. So Windswept Hillock, this is very simple. It says units here have ganking. They can move from battlefield to battlefield. This is really good in aggro decks because it allows you to capitalize on the total amounts of points you can earn. So what it lets you do is it lets you play, you know, a unit on turn 1, and then on turn 2, you can conquer the Hillock. Well, now your opponent has to also challenge you at the Hillock, which only favors the Sett deck. Because if you're challenging me, that means that I'm getting to use my Sett Legend ability. That also means that I'm going to be attacking into you like fairly well, most likely, because I'm going to have 2 units that can attack into your 1 unit, even if you put a unit there to hold, unless that unit has some sort of like holding mechanic like shield or is very good at holding. There's a good chance that my 2 units that I have in play is going to beat your 1 unit, so I immediately get that point back, get point tempo back. There's a chance that just one of my units can get rid of your unit, and then now I can take both battlefields because I have 2 units that are going to be ready to attack. And it's just a really nice to get ahead in point tempo, as well as if your opponent ever just doesn't have a 2 energy card, or like a turn, if your opponent doesn't have a turn 1 play, so you play a unit on turn 1 and your opponent just passes, this card will just absolutely punish them and steamroll them. Because what happens is you play your unit on turn 1, they pass, or let's say they ramp or something, right? Like they do something that doesn't interact with your unit. That lets you conquer Hillock on turn 2, and then you can play a unit in base or play a second unit. And then, because your opponent didn't have a unit to immediately counter you, you can immediately conquer the other battlefield by ganking over with your 2-drop and still just develop your good units in the base, which is typically a safe place for them, and not have to worry about moving them up or having to try and hold or do anything that can put your units in danger. Just keep developing your board at that point. You're going to be ahead in point tempo by a decent amount, and it's a really good way to punish slow decks like the Auroras that don't play units. It's also a very good counter to any hold battlefield. So we're seeing a lot of battlefields like Master Yi. Sometimes you'll play into an Ari. Anything that has a hold trigger on the battlefield, Windswept Hillock is very good into that, because what it does is while your opponent tries to, you know, hold down the hold battlefield, because usually it'll be like when you hold here, draw 1, right? That battlefield, or even my battlefield, the Star-Tipped Peak, that says when you hold here, channel a Rune Exhausted. What happens is your opponent has to make this decision of, do I put my early unit, or do I start trying to hold on the hold battlefield, or do I just fight them for this Windswept Hillock? Because what happened, if your opponent chooses to just try and hold the hold battlefield or place their units on there, like if they have the Star-Tipped Peak or the God Willows, I think is what it's called, that says hold 1. If they just simply move their 2 energy unit, their 2-drop up to the hold 1 draw card, but we have full control of the Windswept Hillock, that makes it really hard for them to actually hold, because we have the extra pressure of any unit in our base can attack into that battlefield, as well as any unit we've already invested to get points on the Windswept Hillock. It creates a really unbalanced game, and can really put people in spots where they have to make important decisions. And anytime you can create an imbalanced game, just like in chess, right? If you can take people out of their prep or out of what they know early, or you know, and often when you do know what to do, or you've been in that spot before because this is your battlefield, you are going to get a huge advantage. And that's what Windswept Hillock does. Most players are not going to really know how to answer those questions early on, or know how to answer those questions unless they've been put in that spot or have practiced it, right? So oftentimes you'll just see your Master Yi opponent go, okay, well, I'm just going to go to the God Willow because that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to start trying to hold. I can hold with decent numbers. All of this reasoning as to why they need to go to God Willows, and because they're not familiar with the interaction or the matchup, so you let them go to God Willows, and now you can start just stacking up this Hillock. Master Yi can't attack well early on, so you start doing this, and you put your units on the Hillock. Maybe you let your Master Yi opponent draw one card off of the God Willow, and they're thinking, oh, okay, cool, my plan's working, I'm holding the God Willow, I'm holding this battlefield, and they just don't realize that you're about to alpha strike them for somewhere around 10 might on turn 3, if not more than that. And what are they going to do? They're not going to be prepared for that. They probably didn't think that far ahead, and then now you're the one that controls the whole battlefield into the deck that can't really attack well until the late game, where they have, big pump spells, right? So that is something that Hillock is really good at as well, is just helping you aggressively get points on both sides. It does come with the downside of if your opponent is bigger than you and starts to control the Hillock, it becomes really hard to hold the other battlefield if you need to. Granted, we're not a hold deck, so we don't really care about that type of stuff. But it's really nice. It's also really good when you have conquer triggers. So when we have stuff in our deck like Kiana's a really good conquer trigger. We can conquer the Windswept Hillock, draw a card or channel Rune, do whichever one you want to do there, and then if she doesn't die, you can ready her, and then she immediately can gank over to the other battlefield. If they try to kill her, you can just save her with Sett Legend, assuming she's buffed, and then now she's back in base anyways and can now go and attack either battlefield again. It's really good for that. So for those reasons, you can even consider putting more When I Conquer triggers into the deck if that's something you're interested in. Again, the orange set, it's really good for that. You can play your chosen champion, remove the buff, make him 8, attack on the Hillock, conquer, get your buff, and then when he readies from there, if they don't kill him or anything, you just remove the buff, make him an 8, gank over, boom, he conquers again. Super sick battlefield, right? That's really nice for us. And the third battlefield, and this is the one that can be the most changed out. This is one that I can easily see becoming, instead of removing the Monastery of Hirana, I can see removing the Star-Tipped Peak for a Zon Warrens, a Candlelit, something that draws you cards or makes your deck more consistent at finding its late game. But this does help you in the late game in a different way by giving you more runes. So you are a somewhat power-hungry deck for the first few turns, especially if you are buffing and saving and buffing and saving every turn. Yes, we can just simply function on 5 runes, because that's what our deck does, that's what Sett does. We're also an aggressive version of that. But you will want to get to a point to where eventually you can cast this grand stratagem. You don't really want to use Kiana to channel a rune when you conquer with her. You basically just want to be using her to draw cards, to dig you into stuff. Anytime an aggro deck can draw cards, it's very good, right? So grand stratagem is our end game. So being able to channel runes to either play our big set eventually, or play our stratagem, or play a unit and then have runes open left to play Unyielding Spirit, or have extra runes to recycle with the set, so we're not actually going down on runes ever, is very good. Again, is it as good as drawing cards? I think so right now. I think it's perfectly fine. Maybe it's too much when you play the seal and don't have enough draw. That's very possible. Could be possible, but I like Star-Tipped Peak right now. I like that it gives you a rune. I understand that I have a very good go first battlefield in this Hillock. I also think Star-Tipped Peak is a very good neutral battlefield. You can play Star-Tipped Peak game 1, and then if you win the die roll, cool, you now have this hold battlefield that you can start trying to fight over. If you lose the if you lose the die roll, that's fine. Star-Tipped Peak isn't one of those battlefields where if your opponent holds it one time, they run away with the game or anything like that, right? So it's not that big of a deal. And then, Windswept Hillock is a really good go first battlefield, and then Monastery of Hirana is our go second battlefield, simply because most decks just don't use it. We are one of the few decks in the meta right now that actually play buff tokens, and so we're one of the only decks that can really use it to discard a buff and draw a card. Even with that being said, there is a chance that Monastery of Hirana goes and doesn't become, spend a buff to draw one, because we are a deck that I don't have a lot of buffers in my deck, buffing other cards. I play, 5 total right now. there's a chance that I don't really want to be spinning the buff. Of course, there's a chance I do. Maybe it's a Sith 3 and that's good. There's a chance that this Monastery of Harana, I'm thinking of, can become the battlefield that just says when you hold here, like buff a unit. Because what that allows us to do now is attack in with a 2 might unit or 2 cost unit. We hold that battlefield, it gets a buff on it. So now it tells your opponent, hey, you have to interact with my unit, because if you don't stop me from holding, my unit is unkillable. My unit will no longer die. It'll have a buff, so it gets bigger, but more importantly, it will not die anymore. And that is a very big question to ask your opponent and ask them how they want to do it. I think that would be a very good battlefield to play going second as well when your opponent puts out their go first battlefield, whether if it's a hold battlefield or one that they want to conquer early. I'm saying, hey, I'm going to conquer this other side, and you're going to have to fight me for it. Otherwise, my unit's going to become unkillable. I think it's very good. Sett has a lot of battlefield choices, is what I'm getting at. So you have Windswap Tilak, Monastery of Harana, and Starts at Peak is where I'm at now. You could go full card draw filter and play Zon Warren's Candlelit Monastery of Harana. Perfectly fine. You can even go with the when you hold draw card. I think that's very bad though. We are not a hold deck, and this is not a hold meta. You do not want to be holding. You want to be interacting with your opponent on your attack, especially when you're playing Sett. You interact with them on your attack. You don't want to give them chances to interact with you while you're defending, because that's when cards like Watcher get really good. And that's when a lot of cards that target battlefields become really good, is when you have units on battlefield trying to hold. This just kind of shuts that game plan down by attacking, bring your unit back, attack, bring your unit back. Another thing with Windswap Tilak I forgot to mention is this is actually very good when you can ready a unit, which we can do with first mate, as well as I've considered playing things like Wallop, which is 2 energy, ready a unit, or you can spend a buff to play it for free, and it's effectively 0 energy, ready a unit, because what you can do is, attack onto Windswap Tilak, you play the first mate or the Wallop or whatever, you ready that unit and immediately conquer over to the other side, and you're just starting the game at 2 points. Is a huge point tempo swing, because if your opponent is going second, they haven't even had a turn yet, and you're at 2 points. Most decks can't conquer 2 points on turn 2. They can only can't get 2 points on turn 2. They can only get 1 point on turn 2. And then they have to wait until their 2-drop comes in and gets them a point on turn 3, right? So other than that, those are the battlefields we're playing. That's why I think Windswap Tilak is almost like for sure a keeper. I think this one I almost have to play. This card feels too good between the amount of cards that you can ready, the amount that it shuts down other hold battlefields, anything like that is very good. The other two are very interchangeable. You can make them, when you hold here buff, you can make them either of the draw cards. You can keep them with these 2 battlefields. There weren't a lot of other battlefields that I looked at and really, really liked, so these are probably the main 5 that I would look at. Would be Windswap Tilak, Starts at Peak, Monastery of Harana, Zonite Warrens, Candlelit Sanctum, and then I said 5, it's really 6, and then the 6th one is whichever battlefield that says when you hold here, buff a unit. Because, again, are we a hold deck? No, but it does make your opponent answer the question early of, hey, are you going to let my 2 might unit, my 2 cost unit, like, hold here for free? You can just never let me hold ever, because if you do, I'm just going to get a buff on that unit, and it will not die, right? And that's pretty sick. Now we can get into the actual cards in our deck. I know that it's very long. Like I told you guys, strap in. It's long. We're 45 minutes in, and we haven't gone over a single card in our main deck. I just, I want to be very in-depth. These videos are for people that want to invest a lot of time and want to invest what they can to become the best possible Riftbound players. So by the time tournaments come out and metas come out, they are prepared and ready for it. I know I'll get comments saying, yep, too much hour-long video, blah, blah, blah. I'm used to it, is what it is. Start off with our deck, we'll go over the Chosen Champion because it's the first card. We are playing Sett Brawler, aka Orange Sett. So Orange Sett says, when I'm played and when I conquer, buff me, and then you can spend a buff to give me 4 might this turn. So it's a 5 energy, 1 power 4, which stat line is obviously very bad. But what happens is because he enters with a buff, he's effectively always going to be a 5 energy, 1 power 8 while attacking. You cannot use this ability in reaction speed, or you cannot use it during a combat, but most of the time what happens is you use it on your turn before you attack. You play the Sett, he comes in, the next turn he readies, you remove the buff, he attacks for 8 somewhere, clears the battlefield, he will then conquer, and then when he conquers, he rebuffs himself, so that way if your opponent tries to kill him on their turn, you can save it with your Sett legend, and then find a way to buff him on the next turn, or again, go conquer and buff him. Have a lot of plays like that. I like this more than the yellow Sett. Yellow Sett was actually fairly close, honestly, in this style of deck, where it says get +1 might for every buffed unit here. The issue with that is it forces you to commit multiple units typically onto an attack, and that is not a good place you want to be, because that starts to put you in this weird like attempt to hold strategy. And like I said earlier, I don't think holding meta is really good right now. I think that letting your opponent interact with you and having your units on battlefields on their turn is typically not where you want to be unless you play a lot of spells, or that is your entire game plan is to be holding. If your entire game plan is not built around holding, you probably are not wanting to try and hold. So orange Sett it is. Next we are on 1 seal. Also, don't worry, the cards we actually will be pretty quick going over, because this is an aggro deck and most of them serve a very simple purpose, which is going to be efficient, get points, buff units. So don't worry, this video isn't actually going to be like 2 hours long. Might be an hour long, you know. Next, we have Seal Strength. We have a 1 of Seal in an aggro deck. It's because we do have an okay amount of draw in our deck. We have, 3 Kianas, which can draw us cards. We do have at least 1 battlefield right now that draws us cards. Potentially, you can play up to 3 battlefields that draw you cards. So seeing 1 Seal is not that bad. It's really good if you end up playing the Candlelits, which, is very real. Again, I can very much see the Star-Tipped Peak being turned into a Candlelit by the time this, video comes out. I just think all of them are fine, and I wanted to show the non-draw card options because I think they'll be the least popular and give the reasoning behind them, and it's easier to learn when you can see the card. But point being, Seal is good when you have a lot of draw in your deck. It's also good when you're a very power-hungry deck. We play 1 Seal because sometimes you will high roll and have the Seal turn 1, and you will just be +1 energy for the entire game, or plus a bunch of energy for the entire game, because Seal either is paying for a card, which we actually do play a decent amount of orange power, like orange 1 power cards, or what it does is it, at the very least, just pays for your Sett ability every turn. So you're not having to recycle a rune every turn to the Sett ability, which is super nice. And then, a lot of our cheap units that we're wanting to play, or cards that cost power and 1 power, are going to be orange. Like we looked at the graph earlier, for the power cost, we have a bunch of cards that cost 0, and then we have 9 orange cards total that cost 1, and then only 4 that cost, 9 orange cards that cost 1 power, and only 4 yellow cards that cost a power. And then, of course, 2 of those yellow cards that cost a power are fake, because they are hidden blades, so really they can also pay an orange power for, and tap your Seal to pay for it if you want to. So that's where we're on Seal. 2 Unyielding Spirit. Like I said earlier, Kai'Sa's the most played deck right now, and is probably the best deck in the game right now until people start countering it and forcing it to build differently, which I think it can happen. I think it will never not be a top 3 deck, but at the moment right now, it is the most refined deck and probably the best deck in the game. So, playing 2 Unyielding Spirit is very good. Unyielding Spirit just says, hey, nice Falling Star. It is the best answer in the game right now to Falling Star, which is the best card in the game right now. So having a 1 energy answer to the best card in the game is a really good spot to be in, and is probably the best case to play any orange deck at the moment right now if you're not playing Kai'Sa, right? So imagine they try and do something to your Kiana, boom, 1 energy, Unyielding Spirit, save your unit. They try and Falling Star 2 units, boom, 1 energy, Unyielding Spirit, save 2 units. You try to attack and their plan is to shoot it with a Void Seeker or a Hex Ray or anything like that. Boom, Unyielding Spirit, save your unit, it doesn't die. Unyielding Spirit, great card, should be played in every orange deck, and should probably be played in the main deck of every orange deck right now because of the amount of Kai'Sa presence and how good it is into the meta. Pit Rookie is one of our 2 energy units, as a 2 energy 2. When you play me, buff another friendly unit. Very self-explanatory. Pit Rookie is in here to buff other units while just being a 2 mana 2, so you always have a turn 1 play. And being able to buff other cards is good. That's how it will be used 99% of the time. If you absolutely have to play it on turn 1 because it is your only turn 1 play, you do. But again, 99% of the time, it is just in here to buff other units and turn on your Sett ability or turn on their, abilities if they have any ability from being buffed. You can combo it with your Sett Brawler. So what you do is you untap, you ready everything, you remove the buff from Sett that he gives himself, your chosen champion. You remove the buff he gives himself, so he attacks for 8, and then you can play a Pit Rookie, a Pookie, to buff the Sett again, remove that buff, now he attacks for 12, and now you're just attacking for 12 for fun, right? But yeah, oftentimes she will be used to just like buff smaller units or your mid-game units, and that's really good. Next is Confront. So we have 2 Confront in our deck. Card draw / filter to, again, dig deeper for those late game cards is very good. And it says enter units you play this turn, enter ready. That's really good for us because we play a lot of cheap units. So again, if you're on 6 runes or 5 runes, you can play, really you want to play this when you're on 6 runes is the big thing. If you can play it on 7 runes, obviously better. The more runes you can play it on, the better. But 6 runes is really where you want to be because 6 runes allows you to play Confront and then 2 2-drops, or it lets you play Confront and then a 4-drop. So Confront and then play a Fiora, have your Fiora come in accelerated, start attacking and conquering is good. Obviously, it's really good with Kiana. Even good with Kinku Monk, where you just, Confront for 2. Kinku Monk for 4, you buff 2 other units and have a 4 might unit enter ready. That is a 6 might swing entering ready that your opponent might not have been prepared for the math for. And then again, at the very worst, it's just like cycling and filtering itself, which is good in an aggro deck. Next, Sett 3 of Cloudfield. This is a 2 energy 1, and it says when you play another unit, buff me. This is not once per turn. This is not one time ever. This is just every time you play a unit. If Sett 3 does not have a buff on her, she buffs herself. So it is effectively a 2 energy 2, but she will permanently never die because she is always buffing herself. As soon as you play a unit, she buffs herself. She'll always have a buff for you to spend on things like Call to Glory, if you want to play Call to Glory for free, or other cards that might require a buff as a price. So Sett 3 is very good there. Hidden Blade is another card that we are playing. It is a 2 energy, 1 power, or most of the time you're just going to hide it for 1 power. It says kill a unit on a battlefield, its controller draws 2. This card is amazing in Sett. It is another draw engine for us. 99% of the time, again, you are using this as a way to simply draw 2. Really cool interaction is you can target a unit with a buff with Hidden Blade, and you can save the unit, and Hidden Blade will still draw you 2 cards. It does not say, kill a unit to draw 2. It does not say kill a unit, when that unit dies, draw 2, the killed unit's controller draws 2. It just simply says, kill a unit on a battlefield, period, second text of its controller draws 2. So it goes to kill a unit, you save it with your Sett legend, that check passed, and then the second check says its controller draws 2. Its controller is referring to the first unit. That unit is still in play, still a valid target for the spell and everything. So you will draw 2. And you didn't lose your unit. So very big. You can use it to kill stuff that's coming in at you. If your opponent just plays a Darius Cleave or swings in an accelerated Kaisa at you or something, you can very much just play a Hidden Blade and kill it. But a lot of times you're going to just be using it to draw 2 on yourself and build up another really big board and draw into your stratagem. Daring Poro is a 2 energy 2, one of the best 2s in the game because it says Assault 1. So it just has Assault 1. Whenever it attacks, it gets +1 might. So it is a 2 energy 3 effectively when you're attacking an opponent's battlefield, which makes it really easy to break in or easier to break in. If you can buff it, it's going to be a 2 energy 4, so it'll be coming in for 4 might over your opponent's unit, and 4 might is on par with any 4-drop unit right now in the game. So most decks are going to be losing any early game unit they play to this buffed up Daring Poro, and then he'll have a buff on it so you can save it, bring him back, and then attack for another 3 on the following turns, which is sick. Just, again, a very solid rate too. Next is Trifarian Glory Seeker, another card that is just a really good rate for a 2. It is a 2 energy 2, and then it has Legion, so it says when you play me, buff me, and you get the Legion effect if you've played another card this turn. So this is a card that's really good with Confront. It's just a really cheap card, so when you're on 4 energy turn 2, if you played a 2 might unit on turn 1, like one of the best cards you can have is, let's say you played a Daring Poro on turn 1, turn 2, you ready everything, you have 4 energy now, you play a Pit Rookie to buff the Daring Poro, attack with it, and then you play a Trifarian Glory Seeker. You've spent 0 power, have 3 units in play, and 2 of them have buffs on them and are 3s, which is very good. If your opponent comes in and tries to kill your Daring Poro that you attacked with, you save it with Sett Legend, and then now on the next turn you can just attack for 8 on turn 3, which is going to be really hard for opponents to deal with. Again, this is where things like Hillock come in, where if they don't interact with your Poro or can't kill your Poro, but they go to the other battlefield even, or they're trying to hold on that battlefield, you can just attack for 8, and that's really good. Outside of that, the next unit is First Mate. So First Mate is a 3 energy 3, again, no power cost, and it just says when you play me, ready another unit. This combos really well with Hillock. This combos really well with Orange Sett, because what happens is you can get to these board states where you have like 2 First Mates in your hand, or you got to a spot where you can ready 2 units in a turn. So what happens is you remove a buff from Orange Sett, you attack in for 8, he rebuffs himself because he conquers. Now you play a First Mate, you ready the Sett, you move him back, second First Mate, ready the Sett, remove the buff, attacking for 12 on the other battlefield, and you effectively attacked for 20 with just Sett, not including any other units you had in play. You spent 6 energy and having 2 First Mates to conquer for 20. Of course, if you just have the Windswept Hillock, you just go, you spin the buff, attack Hillock for 8, conquer, buff himself, play First Mate, ready the Sett, remove the buff, attack for 12 again. That's a combo you only need 1 First Mate for, and again is why Hillock is just so crazy in this deck. In this deck list specifically, because of combos like that, when you can ready units, it's good. Obviously, anytime you can attack with the Kiana or attack with an important unit, get the kill, get the point, First Mate to ready that unit, bring it back and keep it to safety if the unit isn't buffed or you just don't want to use the power. It's always nice to just save your units and keep them in safe spaces in your base and not have to worry about them dying to a conquer effect or a conquering unit or a spell or anything that affects units at battlefields. Call to Glory is a 3 energy spell at reaction speed. It says give a unit +3 might this turn, or you can remove a buff from a unit, so spin that buff and then play this card for free. So it turns into a 0 energy, give a unit +3 might this turn, which is really good and really hard to play around, especially if it's, we're an aggro deck, so we're spending all of our energy early to play these efficient cards, to play these buffed cards. Your opponent's trying to attack into one of your cheap, I call them shitter units, they're cheap units, and you have the option to save it with Sett, or you just have the option to give it +3 might with this pump spell for free. If you have a buffed unit from like Trefarian early or a Pit Rookie early, a Cythria early, like 3/4 of your, 3/4 of your 2-cost units either buff themselves or buff other units. So you have a 75% chance of just having a unit with a buff to make this a 0 energy card. That's really good. That also allows you to sometimes play like a Cythria on turn 1. Turn 2, you can play a Kiana, and that will buff the Cythria. And then now you have 0 energy, a buff Cythria in play, a Kiana in play. If your opponent tries to Falling Star your Kiana, you can just remove the buff from Cythria, call to Glory the Kiana to make her a 7 might unit, and now the Falling Star doesn't even kill the Kiana. So this is effectively another way to have an Unyielding Spirit against damaging spells early. Because what happens then is your opponent can still kill your Kiana most of the time with a Stupefy or a Smokescreen, but best case scenario is they just have a Stupefy. That is still a lot of power because they have to recycle 1, 2, 3, 4 to target the Kiana. So even with Kai's ability, so they had to recycle 3 just for the Falling Star. And then if they have the Stupefy, they have to recycle 4 because they have to target us with a Stupefy. So your opponent on turn 2, so they're going to have 5 runes in play, try to kill your Kiana by recycling a minimum of 3 to 4 runes when they only have 5 runes in play total. If they try and do it on turn 3, that's still really bad for them. So anytime you can buff a unit for 0 mana, it's good. 0 energy cards, good. Who knew? Vanguard Captain. When you play me, play 2 recruits. This is a Legion effect, meaning again, if you've played another card this turn, this 3 energy, 1 power, 3 might unit summons 2 more 1 might units, so it is effectively a 3 energy 5, which is really good rate. More importantly, it makes 2 units. Why is that important? Because we play cards like Grand Stratagem. We play cards like Kinku Monk, which really favors when you have a bunch of units in play. This is something that is really just playing for your late game. Vanguard Captain is simply in here. I think anytime you are playing a Grand Stratagem deck or Grand Stratagem in your deck, you should be playing some amount of copies of Vanguard Captain. Buffing her with a buff token somehow, making her a 4 is fine when she comes with 2 2s. If you play Vanguard Captain into Kinku Monk, which you can buff the 2 tokens, the 2 recruit tokens, now you can just attack in for 7, which is really good. Making the units go from 1 to 2 is very good. But sometimes just having that one is fine. Grand Stratagem, again, getting it buffed up. With Grand Stratagem, this is, 3, 4, 5, plus another 15. So this is 20 might on its own, because it's going to be 6 might for each recruit, so that's 12, and then 8 might for the Vanguard Captain, that's another 8, so that's 20. Oh my gosh, Winston. So that's 20 might right there with the Grand Stratagem. Sorry about that. Winston's crazy. He does not like Grand Stratagem. The last cards here are Kinku Monk. So Kinku Monk, I'm only on 2 because it does feel bad to kind of double draw early. I actually have been playing more games on 2 where I felt like I could really use a Kinku Monk, both because you really want ways to buff units, but because it can buff multiple units. Again, this really benefits your curves where you play a bunch of cards out early and units out early. A lot of times aggro decks run into this issue where you dump your hand out, but they're just a bunch of shitters, and then you don't have ways to actually win the game or make them impactful. And so what Kinku Monk does is it does make them impactful, and it makes it to where they can be bigger, be saved by set buffs, and some cases like Kiana and Fiora, they just get a whole bunch of abilities. So I think 3 Kinku is probably looking good in the future. I might go down to just 1 Hidden Blade again, or there's a chance I just take out the seal, and I think that's also fine. There's a lot of things you can take out to make room for the 3rd Kinku. You can even take out like the 3rd Wild Claw Shaman. Probably not. Maybe it's just like cut Fiora completely, play Kinku Monk, play like a Wallop or something is like what I'm looking at in the future. Anyways, that's the purpose of Kinku Monk. Next is Kiana. There's not a lot to say. Kiana's a great card. 4 energy 4 with Deflect. So when I conquer, she replaces herself or channels a Rune if you're really trying to ramp. Most of the time, you're just going to be using her to draw cards. I've said it a million times in this video. Drawing cards in an aggro deck is good. Drawing into and towards your stratagem is good. So, having a card that has deflect keyword, so if they tried to use things like the Falling Star or any removal spell on it or ability on it, they have to start recycling. We can save it with things like Call to Glory and Unyielding Spirit. This card is effectively your chosen champion, except it's not chosen. But I like Kiana more than I like Orange Sett because of she's cheap and can be played on turn 2 going first, as well as the deflect cost is good, and then the ability to draw cards is just as good. As being bigger in some scenarios. Next is Fiora. This is a card that I like but don't love. I can definitely see cutting her. I like that she's 4 might, which is very important. Basically, you can see a lot of my cards will go from this 2 might jump all the way to 4. I don't play a lot of 3 might units. I play first mate because of the ability, not really because of the might. This could be a 2 might unit and I'd still play it. And then Vanguard Captain, again, because of the ability, not because of the might. This could be a 2 might unit. I'd still play it just because of how it works with Grand Stratagem. But it goes from 2, effectively, on your units you're wanting to play, to 4, because 4 dodges Falling Star. Falling Star only does 3 damage at a time. So if you have 4 might units into play, it gets really awkward. They have to then have, again, they have to have the Stupefy or a way to reduce might to actually be able to efficiently kill a 4 might unit. But the reason Fiora's in here is because when she does get a buff token on her, she gains keywords of Deflect and Ganking and Shield, which Shield just makes it hard for her to kill. The biggest thing is it gets Deflect, so if your opponent does try to blast it with a spell or something, they have to recycle extra runes. The Shield is nice because it makes it a 6 might unit, which covers that 5 might threshold of some decks that are attacking it with 5 might units, which is quite good. It beats a 5 might beats a lot of like mid-range units or bigger than like your very small units. It's still too small to deal with really big units, but it's a nice mid-size unit that 6 is beating. And then Wild Claw Shaman is the last 4. Like I said, I'm thinking about cutting Fiora because while this stuff is cool, she doesn't actually help a lot with the deck. I like that she doesn't have a power cost, but we don't care about that too much. And I would probably rather just have another Kinku Monk, which can buff multiple units, or a card that can ready. I think both of those options are very fine options, or maybe even a card that draw cards. I think all of those can probably be more value than just a vanilla 4. Most of the time that has to have a buff, but if you add in buffs, it gets better. And the last one is Wild Claw Shaman. It says 3, it says 4 mana 3. It's not. It is a 4 energy 3 might unit that says when you play me, you can spend a buff to buff me and then ready me. So what that means is when you play him, you can remove a buff from another unit and then move that buff effectively to Wild Claw Shaman, and then you ready him. So he is a a 4 energy accelerated 4, which is really good stat line. Of course, the air quotes downside is when you play it, you have to remove the buff from another unit, but a lot of times that doesn't really matter because your smaller unit did its job, and then this unit's coming in as a 4 might accelerate unit. That's good. Best combo possible is you have a Cithria in play and a Wildclaw Shaman. If the Cithria already has a buff, what you do is you play the Wildclaw Shaman, you stack the triggers, so that way you remove the buff from Cithria, buff the Wildclaw Shaman, and then Cithria will now trigger because you've played another unit in the Wildclaw, so Cithria's trigger will resolve and then buff her, so she will keep her buff and now you've buffed Wildclaw Shaman. The other way is if she doesn't have a buff, you can still play the Wildclaw Shaman, but now you reverse the triggers, so you stack them in a way to where Cithria will get her buff first, and then now that she has a buff, you can spin that buff to remove, you can spin that buff to buff the Wildclaw Shaman, which is very good. They combo very well with each other. Obviously, you can spin a buff from any other unit, and it's also fine, but spinning the buff from specifically Cithria or having a Cithria in play is, oops, oh my gosh, how did that happen? But spinning a buff with the Cithria in play is, or playing Wildclaw Shaman with the Cithria in play is very good because they can combo off each other in positive ways no matter what the board state looks like. And then the last card in our main deck is Grand Stratagem. Self-explanatory, really. Give all friendly units +5 might this turn. This is your end game. This is your payoff for being aggressive and getting a bunch of points early, is that once you get to 6 points, that's all you have to do in this deck. You're just fighting for 6 points. Once you get to 6 points, your goal should be to just be building up a big enough base to where when you play the Grand Stratagem, it is just a guaranteed lethal because you have, 3, 4, 5 units in your base. This is coming in. If you have 5 units, this is +25 might on top of whatever their might is. Even at the baseline of all being 2 might units. Again, 5 times 2, that's 10, plus 25, that's 35 might. Decks aren't really holding for 35 might, especially by the time you can play the Grand Stratagem and have 6 points. It is one of the strongest cards in the entire game when your deck is built around it, so our deck is built around it, and that's how we win games. Lastly, sideboard. We're not going to go over this too much because I'm putting out a sideboard guide for free on Metafy. So make sure to check that out. When it goes live, you'll get a notification. But right now, what we have in here is we have 1 Unyielding Spirit to finish off the play set, or the set of Unyielding Spirits for when you do play against Kai'Sa. Just put the 3rd one in. It's going to be really good. We're on 3 Salvage right now because Aurora is very popular, as well as Baited Hook is very good and it's getting popular in the West, even if it's not popular in China. So having this as a way to destroy a Baited Hook and destroy Auroras are really huge tempo swings. Both decks struggle. Aurora, if you destroy their Aurora, just lose into Salvage. And Baited Hook doesn't really just lose if you kill their Baited Hook, but if they've been playing around it and planning for it, it is a really big tempo swing, and you will oftentimes just win out on tempo and win with a Grand Stratagem before they can start doing their broken Baited Hook stuff. Noxian Drummer is in my deck because if I go second, I can just take out the 2 Fiora, put in the 2 Noxian Drummer, and it's fine. 3 energy, 3 is fine. It makes a token when you attack, so if they don't immediately deal with it, you can just have more units for the Grand Stratagem, and that's really good for you. And the last is 2 Leona, and Leona is just for Master Yi, effectively. You could play it into other mid-range decks, and that's perfectly fine, but for the most part, it is just going to be Leona. You could play it into Lee Sin decks, any deck that just covers with really big units and few units, but they're really big. Leona's going to be really good into, whether that's Aurora, Master Yi, any type of Lee Sin deck. That's why Leona's in the sideboard. So that's the whole deck tech. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I will have, again, the link to just all of my Piltover archive decks in the comments below. And if you click on those, it will be the most updated deck. I will have comments. I'm starting to do this thing where I post comments. You can see when you save a video, or sorry, save a deck here. When you go to save the deck, or update it, it gives you an option to write in the description. So I will be doing that. I'll be writing in the description anything that I change from this video, as well as the reasonings for it or other cards I'm looking into. So go check that out. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Go join my Discord. I know it's a long video. They're always long videos. TLDR, this is an aggro deck that is trying to swarm out to get points early and then end the game with a stratagem once you get to 6 points. It works because Set Legend will save your early game units when you buff them, so you will never lose your board state really, and your stratagem will always be big, and you can always present a decent amount of attacking threats. So that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'll see you in the next one.